Donald Trump may have braced himself for public skirmishes with rivals, but it's the insidious betrayals by lower-level partners that are stinging worst.
Developing right now, a number of countries are updating their travel advisories to the U.S. following the Trump administration's ongoing immigration crackdown and a recent announcement the U.S. is considering an updated travel ban on 43 countries.
The indications are not subtle, they're blinding. Factory floors going idle, deals vanishing overnight, stock graphs swinging like wrecking balls through buildings. Canada's subtle tilt towards new trade partners is recharting the battlefield quietly, bringing once untouchable American giants crashing overnight. It's not just an issue of policy shift. This is the first quiver of a storm powerful enough to drain entire communities. Factory workers, farmers, truckers, every strand of livelihood tied to trans-border trade now oscillates tenuously on the cusp of catastrophe. The underpinning that was assumed to be rock strength is now shaking, and the only question remaining: how close are we to breaking point? Number 7. Walmart, the retail behemoth now seeing its northern stronghold fall apart before its very eyes. The first domino to fall. America's biggest retailer. Walk into Walmart's mammoth distribution hubs along the Canadian border. Industrial giants that stretch for miles. Conveyor belts that can transport cities' worth of goods in a day. Trucking fleets lines as far as the eye can see like steel dominoes, rolling American wares into Canadian markets once as certain as dawn. Walmart turned this border bulge into a commerce behemoth that changed business in North America. 47 distribution hubs designed with surgical precision for Canadian delivery routes. 18,000 employees whose livelihoods depend entirely on pushing American goods northward. A Canadian revenue stream of $3.8 billion. Not spare change, but the margin between growth and stagnation for a company already under siege from Amazon's digital dominance and shifting consumer habits. But Canada's new web of free trade agreements with 11 nations threatens to strip Walmart's advantage at the source. South Korean electronics flow directly into Canadian shelves, bypassing American distribution channels. Japanese consumer staples leap over Walmart's warehouses altogether through efficient Pacific channels. Australian farm products sail directly onto Canadian shelves, untouched by U.S. factories or shipping. Walmart's strength, its geography and infrastructure, is evaporating like winter breath. Leaked internal memos create a hellish picture. Canadian market penetration projected to fall 34% short of early estimates. Distribution center mergers in crisis planning. Workforce transition strategies sketched out for those on the brink of failure due to reduced throughput. This isn't speculation about the future. It's occurring now. Years of investment in infrastructure can be reduced to stranded assets overnight as Canada's alliances harden. The stock market tells the tale with brutal precision. Volatility spikes on a day-to-day basis by 7 to 9%, as the market cannot price a continental giant under threat of losing access to 1/3 of its geography in less than 2 years. Behind closed doors, the analysts are murmuring about restructuring models that would reshape the very map of American retail itself. But here's the cut that hurts the most. When your whole supply chain is built around a single pivotal relationship and the bond snaps out of your control, you don't just lose revenue. You lose the very machinery that generated it. How do you recycle 47 enormous distribution centers for markets they were never constructed to serve? How do you retrain 18,000 employees for supply chains that might never materialize? The arithmetic is merciless. Every lost Canadian contract is a ripple back through the entire chain. Manufacturers that slowed production for Canadian shelves look for customers or shut down. Cross-border smart trucking companies watch routes vanish. Small towns built around Walmart hubs stare into a future without their anchor employer. And this is only the first chapter of America's coming retail apocalypse. If the nation's largest retailer is already hemorrhaging Canadian market share, imagine the devastation in store for manufacturers that depend entirely on northern access. Number 6. General Motors. The car giant now confronted with continental gridlock. When retail slips, manufacturing is soon to follow, and when Detroit trembles, the rest of the nation takes the shock. Back in the day, Made in Detroit was something that resonated around the world. Factory floors boomed with industrial anthems. Workers poured through plant gates like streams of American resolve. The heartbeat of U.S. manufacturing produced vehicles that ruled roads around the globe and defined automotive greatness. General Motors stood at the center of that tradition: steel, precision, and innovation embedded in the DNA of every vehicle on North American roads. Canadian plants long depended on GM's meticulously designed parts, as vital to assembly as springs are to a watch. $2.1 billion in Canadian automotive sales every year. 23 plants perfected to Canadian standards. Hourly supply chains, transporting pieces of equipment across an imaginary line that had previously connected two economies. Now imagine those lines grinding to a halt, buzz of machinery faltering into silence. Canada's new agreements with South Korea and Japan will replace GM's lifeblood with more affordable, faster options. Both nations put together pieces with surgical precision, the same level GM boasted about, but now with tariff benefits and regulatory fast tracks denied to American companies. The numbers cut like steel. South Korean imported brake systems landed by Canadian automakers saved them 17% right away compared to American suppliers. Japanese engines bypass red tape entirely, reaching Canadian factory floors weeks before U.S. shipments, even passing inspection. But the deeper wound? GM not only sold cars to Canada, but built its entire continental strategy on integration. Michigan-made engines went north to Ontario to be assembled. Parts manufactured in Canadian plants went south as finished systems. It was a smooth circle of efficiency perfected over decades. And now that very integration, once GM's greatest asset, is about to become its most debilitating liability. Already, there are rumors afloat in the industry. South Korean firms court Canadian plants with joint ventures that leave GM out of the chain entirely. Japanese manufacturers tour Canadian plants, measuring floor space, crunching numbers on logistics, and drawing up blueprints for deals that would dismantle GM's monopoly one shipment at a time. It is called by analysts the Great Reshuffling, a seismic shift in motor power that could leave America's motor giant alone, cut off from its most significant partner. Behind GM boardroom doors, alarm rings out. Strategy documents stamped urgent reveal rushed overviews of Canadian factory partnerships. Supply chain redundancy planning was put into crisis gears. The public sees confidence. Executives see survival slipping from behind closed doors. And the shockwaves don't stay behind GM's gates. When Canadian contracts evaporate, the tremors have echoes all the way back across the American heartland. Steel mills in Pennsylvania see sudden order collapses. Rubber plants in Ohio count bulk firings as tire contracts move east to Asia. Electronics manufacturers in Texas watch contracts disappear overnight in new alliances. Last month, GM CEO summoned an emergency board meeting. One of the items on the agenda, strategic response to Canadian market disruption. Not subtle, the stock analysts call it an existential crisis disguised as a trade dispute. The kind of change that puts not only one company, but a whole industry in peril. Across America's auto belt, small towns that were established near GM factories are bracing for the unthinkable, a world where their largest employer is questioning whether or not it makes economic sense to continue keeping their doors open. And if the auto giant of yesteryear that once defined American business might be losing its grip on continental integration, then what happens to the businesses that fuel America's very energy grid? Number 5. Exxon Mobil. The energy behemoth now watching its compatriot lifeline unravel. When production weakens, America's energy backbone is never more than an eyelash's length away, and the cracks are widening. Oil derricks, standing like dark cutouts against endless horizons, once bore witness to American energy independence. Refineries lined up like sleep-deprived industrial cities across the skyline. Pipelines snake their way thousands of miles, carrying liquid lifeblood that powered civilization and telegraphed American brawn worldwide. For years, politicians had promised energy independence. But Exxon Mobil had built its dynasty on something altogether different: energy interdependence with Canada. A policy that had appeared timeless, as fixed as bedrock itself. The numbers at one point painted a picture of predominance. $4.2 billion a year in Canadian operations. Pipeline networks moving Canadian crude to American refineries with unmatched efficiency. Natural gas processing plants transforming Canadian natural resources into warmth for American families and energy for American businesses. It was a marriage of abundance and infrastructure. Canada supplied the resources, America processed and exported them to the world. But that union is now dissolving into an ugly divorce, and the divorce settlement may bankrupt America's energy policy. Canada's new alliances are appending Exxon Mobil's assumptions. Norway, the global great energy exporter, is offering alternatives in supply backed by cutting-edge technology. The United Kingdom is supplying advanced energy systems and networks unaffected by U.S. pipelines. But the most deadly shockwave comes from a nation nobody expected, Australia. Contrary to Exxon Mobil, who looked at Canada as a provider of resources to American refineries, Australian firms are providing something new, true partnership. Instead of exporting raw Canadian resources to the south, Australia is helping build refineries in Canada, using European expertise and Asian funds. Raw Canadian crude once headed to Texas now heads to Canadian refineries funded by Australians. Natural gas once burning U.S. plants is being rerouted to power Canadian industry, refined using Norwegian innovations that keep America in the dark. ExxonMobil's in-house forecasts are a doomsday scroll. Canadian access to crude down 43% in the next 18 months. Refinery utilization crashing to 58% capacity. Pipeline revenues in freefall, forcing crisis restructuring just to keep the systems running on fumes. And the second blow is worse. In the absence of regular Canadian feeds, ExxonMobil refineries can't match facilities connected with these new global alignments. The markets already smell blood. Since Canada's statements, ExxonMobil shares have fallen 21%. It's what the analysts refer to as the start of continental energy fragmentation, dismantling a half-century North American energy network. The CEO stood in front of microphones with scripted lines. "We are optimistic about long-term relationships with all continental partners." But out of earshot, they read between the lines for what it was really: desperation masquerading as optimism. And on the ground, the ruin is unfolding quickly. The refinery workers in Texas wait to see the axe coming their way as Canadian crude shipments slow down. Pipeline workers in the Midwest wonder when their corridors will remain profitable anymore. Small towns built around ExxonMobil refining facilities look in dismay at their uncertain destiny, their economic destiny undermined by deals no longer involving the United States. And if America's energy grids can be dismantled this quickly, the next domino is already tilted. The food-producing backbone that sustains both nations is also going to face its own existential moment of truth. Number 4. Cargill. The food giant now watching its harvest margins wither away. When energy supply chains collapse, food security is never far behind, and the shaking is infectious. Picture it. Fields of wheat rolling as far as the horizon can see, golden seas heaving under skies so vast they seem to be endless. Giant combines cutting through the wheat fields under prairie skies. Grain elevators looming over small towns like steel cathedrals, monuments to good luck that built America's rural foundation. For generations, this was the face of American agricultural dominance. And at its core, Cargill constructed a continental empire, a massive system rerouting America's harvest northward through supply lines once as reliable as the cycle of seasons. The scale is staggering. $2.8 billion in American farm products flow into Canada each year: wheat, corn, soybeans, packaged goods. A grain and goods river sustaining Canadian families and guaranteeing North America's food security. Cargill itself controls nearly a third of that business, 31%, with its border-to-border system. Grain terminals tower like bastions of American strength, and processing plants transform American grain into Canadian staples. It appeared unbeatable. Now that river is drying up. Canada's new alliances with Australia and Brazil, farm superpowers rivaling America, are set to turn bountiful into drought. On fresh contracts, Australian wheat moves into the Canadian marketplace with a 16% price advantage over U.S. grain. Soybeans from Brazil bypass weeks of delay with accelerated processing, leaving U.S. shipments stranded in bureaucratic jams that now seem antiquated. The decline isn't swift. It's a slow-motion slide burying subdivisions layer by layer. Cargill's whole system relies on consistent, large-volume purchase. Grain elevators need smooth flow. Processing plants need stable inputs in order to be profitable. But when Canada looks to new sources, these plants shut down, and the ripple effect explodes back through the American heartland. For North Dakota, Minnesota, and Montana farmers, all states where Canadian consumption represents 45 to 65% of farm export income, it is calamity. Commodity prices are already crashing as their largest market shifts to other continents. The tiny towns that were established around the food processing facilities are having their anchors pulled out, as Cargill weighs whether such factories can even continue to operate. In its latest quarterly report, Cargill tried to disguise the truth behind a wave of corporate doublespeak. Anticipated volume reductions in Canadian markets may require facility consolidation and workforce optimization. Translated from business essay, it means layoffs, shut down factories, and ghost towns. Analysts have already labeled it the new agricultural depression. Not drought, not pestilence, nor crop disease, but an economic drought, a diplomatic shift that wipes away America's most secure market in a single night. And behind the statistics are human lives coming apart. Farmers who honed Canadian export standards over decades now find their skills irrelevant at home. Cross-border contacts made into careers by sales reps disappear overnight. Engineers who mapped the actual infrastructure of continental union wake up to find that what they know is obsolete in an age when that union no longer exists. The shock waves spread like falling dominoes. Factory owners who built machines tailored to Canadian specifications have contracts terminated. Trucking fleets that make a living on cross-border agricultural transport have their routes erased from the map. Farming businesses that were funded by rural banks on the promise of Canadian revenue now default on loans as farmers are brought low by lost revenues. And just as agriculture begins to wither, the next domino topples forward. America's technological infrastructure, the digital nervous system that connects the continent, is about to be cut from its northern neighbor. Number 3. Microsoft. The tech giant now watching its virtual highway splintering apart. As traditional supply lines deteriorate, the invisible arteries of the digital age face their own severing. Envision the icons of American technical supremacy, glistening campuses in Silicon Valley illuminated by suns that appear never to set. Enormous server farms, humming like factory hearts circulating the blood of international commerce. Fiber optic cables encircling the oceans, carrying the chatter of humanity at light speed. For almost 4 decades, Microsoft stood at the center of this web, building its continental supremacy on one simple principle as firm as physics. Data flows like water, always flowing in the shortest path. For 2 decades, that path ran through the United States. Microsoft's networks were the gateway, its infrastructure the toll booth. The scale is staggering. 1.4 billion daily transactions processed through Canadian operations. Banking, healthcare, government systems, all routed through US-based servers under treaties thought as unshakable as granite. $3.1 billion in annual Canadian revenue. 18 strategically placed data centers. 14,000 workers were dedicated to keeping Canada connected to the rest of the world through digital umbilicals. That monopoly is breaking, however. New friendships Canada is forging are establishing alternative digital highways that bypass American infrastructure completely. Singapore and South Korea offer processing with lower latency to Asian markets than geography allows the U.S. to replicate. Switzerland provides bulletproof bank security U.S. businesses can't replicate under regulatory constraints. The United Kingdom delivers artificial intelligence technologies that harmonize with Canadian creativity to perfection in ways Microsoft never could. The actual surprise, however, lay deep within technical blueprints. Engineers discovered new trans-Pacific cables under construction, direct digital arteries linking Canada. Data that once flowed through the servers of Microsoft in the United States now will pour directly into Asian financial hubs, European research facilities, and Australian corporations. Microsoft's greatest asset, proximity and infrastructure, evaporates in a world where distance matters not at light speed. Illegally leaked internal reports tinge the scope of the threat. Canadian data sovereignty initiatives promise to cut American infrastructure dependence by 38%. Other routing plans are already cutting back on U.S. network usage. Revenue projections are still under constant review, but preliminary numbers are grim. The deeper crisis is one of strategy. Microsoft's entire continental model was based on the belief that Canadian information has to pass through American gateways to reach beyond. Billions of infrastructure, employee education, and research partnerships were based on that assumption. Canadian universities work directly with Japanese AI research institutions. Canadian banks connect to Swiss networks with more robust security standards. Canadian government agencies test the storage of data locked within allied systems that deliberately exclude U.S. access. It's already been dubbed by the analysts the Great Decoupling, a tectonic shift in global digital infrastructure that severs the assumption of American intermediation. Microsoft's share chart is the story told with cold precision. 8 to 11% daily movements as the world of investors attempts to price a technology giant that could lose half its continental traffic within 2 years. And the ripples spread far beyond corporate suburbs. Software writers who focus on Canadian compliance are made obsolete. Data center engineers near the border have their operations become redundant. Support staff trained on cohesive North American systems have their expertise diminished overnight as the virtual map fractures. And as America's virtual highways become disconnected, an even more venerable underpinning, the one that holds global finance together, begins to corrode with the burden of continental irrelevance. Number 2. J.P. Morgan Chase. The financial giant watching its northern vaults dissolve. As technology marriages disintegrate, the very lifeblood of cash now must stand on its own. Look at the skyline. Glass spires reaching up into gray skies, monuments to American financial dominance. Behind them, trading floors hum with electronic bedlam, trading trillions of stock in a day. Vaults are filled with assets flowing like electronic rivers of riches, under the control of the American banks that once made world commerce. For generations, J.P. Morgan Chase built its continental empire on bedrock fundamentals. Money needs banks, and banks need networks. Most efficient financial networks? They always ran through American institutions. Canada was no different. J.P. Morgan Chase operations above the border generated $5.7 billion a year, an integrated machine of financial services. Not just old-fashioned banking, but corporate borrowing, investment accounts, foreign exchange, and the complicated derivatives that grease global commerce. Their roster of clients read like Canada's economic who's who: mining giants, energy firms, tech firms, farm exporters. All of them tied to American financial markets in a bid to tap global capital. That dependence is fading, dissolving as quickly as morning frost. Canada is establishing new partnerships. Switzerland, the epitome of banking secrecy and fiscal precision. Singapore, guaranteeing unfettered access to Asia-Pacific markets with no intermediaries from America. And most surprising of all, the United Kingdom, its post-Brexit banking sector more ravenous than ever before for international partnerships. London now grants Canadian mining firms access to metal exchanges without intermediaries by J.P. Morgan siphoning their profits. Energy companies have a better deal selling in Asia through Singaporean networks than paying premium fees to American banks. The numbers write existential risk. 32% of J.P. Morgan's foreign business beyond domestic markets is from Canadian corporate clients. If it loses that portfolio, it is not just about vanished revenue streams. It kills the economies of scale that make their global businesses competitive. Internal risk reporting bears witness to the breakdown. Client retention rates in decline. Currency trading volumes down 27% quarter-on-quarter. Investment management assets quietly in transition as institutions tinker with alternatives. Those very services supposedly indispensable being substituted more rapidly than managers can get their arms around it. And the dominoes don't fall solely at Canada. J.P. Morgan's entire strategy predicated on Canadian companies needing to access American banks in order to get out to the world. Hiring, tech expenditure, compliance infrastructure, all deployed on the basis of that one financial geography assumption. Now, Canadian pension funds bypass Wall Street, pairing off directly with Australian superannuation giants to achieve greater returns. Insurance companies lead European risk platforms with more coverage. Investment firms construct bridges to Asian markets that leave U.S. intermediaries in the rearview mirror. Already, experts have a name for it: the fragmentation of continental finance. A North American economics break that redraws the map of capital flows. J.P. Morgan's stock charts yell the warning. A 14% plummet since Canada's alliance announcements. Volatility so untamed investors admit they can't calculate the true scope of ensuing losses. In public remarks, the CEO insists the bank's long-term continental hegemony is safe. Behind closed doors, insiders describe runaway lobbying expenses in Washington, furiously struggling to maintain old financial veins by way of political muscle. And the ripple effects go far beyond Wall Street. Investment advisors look on as Canadian customers head abroad to foreign competitors. North American trend-based currency speculators have their blueprints burned to the ground. Economists who devoted their lives to studying continental integration are now waking up to find that their expertise is for a universe that has disappeared. If America's strongest bank is losing hold of continental finance, what chance do its manufacturers have when their very existence is hanging in the balance on Canadian integration? Number 1. Caterpillar, the manufacturing giant now confronting the silent specter of assembly lines darkened. Whistles from factories that once cut dawn like war cries of American industry. Conveyor belts carrying precision-made parts to their final destinations now lie in ill-at-ease silence. Safety-suited employees, iron and machinery makers, built not just machinery, but icons of American industrial might. No manufacturer is so its heritage as Caterpillar. Its mammoth machines shaped the modern world. Earth movers molding continents. Bulldozers constructing the roads and bridges connecting nations. Industrial power driving the mines and quarries that feed civilization. Caterpillar was not just an American company. It was the industrial spine of an empire. And now, Canada, its biggest overseas market, looms over that empire like a threat to dismantle it brick by brick. $6.8 billion in Canadian annual sales. Entire supply chains, distribution systems, and technical expertise moving across the border in effortless partnership. It wasn't just commerce, it was interdependence. Canadian assembly facilities supplied specialty parts to American assembly. American factories produced equipment that kept Canadian work running. Together, the system was a continental industrial machine. But that same integration, the driving force of Caterpillar's success, has also been its largest liability. And now, outside competition catches blood. Germany is offering machinery precision crafted to compete with Caterpillar's best. Japan enters with robots that can redefine infrastructure projects. Sweden is bringing mining machinery innovations that cut directly into Caterpillar's market share. And it is not merely competing. It is offering deals that exclude Caterpillar completely from Canada. Giant Canadian construction firms are considering German proposals guaranteed by Swiss financing that would allow them to conduct business outside American suppliers. Japanese companies are making joint ventures available to transfer heavy equipment production from Illinois and Wisconsin to Canada itself, where Pacific shipping lanes open up access to booming Asian markets. Behind closed doors, Caterpillar executives admit the truth. Continental dominance is disintegrating. Internal documents plot desperate reviews of Canadian integration strategies, anxious supply chain redundancy blueprints, and crisis-level warning flashes through corporate risk models. And when just one link in the chain is severed, the destruction is brutal. A canceled Canadian order results in lost business for steel purchasers in Pennsylvania. Ohio electronics factories have their largest contracts vanish overseas. Midwestern component manufacturers find themselves idled. Entire communities once defined by the din of Caterpillar assembly, wonder if their largest employer will pack up and leave. They call it the systematic destruction of North American manufacturing. Caterpillar stock has already lost 19% of its value since the Canadian government announced its new allegiances, with further losses in the pipeline as quarterly statements expose the depth of the carnage. But figures only begin to tell the tale. The true cost is in terms of human beings. Highly skilled workers who spent decades mastering Caterpillar's Canadian project specifications are made redundant overnight. Engineers who built continental systems lose their expertise in fragmented markets. Sales staff who built careers on familiarity with Canadian consumers watched their networks collapse overnight. It is not corporate decline. It is the dismantling of a century of American industrial dominance. A dominance based upon steel, sweat, and engineering genius now threatened with collapse within a decade. And so, having seen factories go dark, markets shift, and supply chains snap, we're left with the final, spectral question. How far are we from the edge? If this video caught you up on what's already transpired, subscribe now, because the next domino is about to fall. And when it does, the stakes won't merely be economic or political. If America loses its closest friend, it won't be a temporary setback. It will be a generation loss, one from which America might never get over.